interaction through physics.
Well, how would you define physical? Maybe is a better way of going about it.
Right now, like something that can eventually, like something that boils down to a quantum and classical model, like a mix of using those two narratives.
And how would you define like a quantum model? Like if I asked you what is quantum causation, how would you define that?
Oh, that's a little bit above my pay grade. I would say that there are these subatomic particles that have these like insane interactions.
And how do they interact with each other?
How?
Yeah, like why is it that particle A that a quark interacts with another quark?
I'm not sure that's a meaningful question. I think you can just observe it happen.
Caleb, hold on. Caleb, I'm not a quantum physicist, but we can say this. Everything reduces down to energy, and that energy is capable of doing work in a physics sense, okay? That's all Ray means when he says that it's causal. Okay, there's nothing we've ever seen that is not energy and that can't do work. If it can't do work, then it doesn't fucking exist.
Right, no, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that there's no reason to think that a non-physical thing. I guess when you talk about doing work too, it's not really clear.
If you look up in the physics sense, like according to physics definition, work just means something that can actually like affect other things.
Well, no, and I grant that I think that the supernatural can affect other things. So if we're going to go by the definition, yeah, I think the supernatural can do work.
So the supernatural can do work. If it can do work, then that means it is measurable. It has to be.
Sure, the effects of it could be measurable, but I don't know if it, like at any given point, you could observe it in the same way you could observe like a quark, right?
No, but it has to be. It has to be. If we had dead Jesus hooked up to an MRI and a heart rate monitor, his heart would start beating.
Right. I agree with that.
So we can measure it.
Yeah, you could measure that theoretically, yeah. I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah. But you would agree that even if you observe that, you couldn't observe like God himself causing that. You would just observe the effects onto the physical body of Jesus suddenly interacting in that way.
Yeah, but once we can do it, we can falsify it and we can reproduce it, and we could like assess for different variables, hidden variables. Like there's ways that we could research it.
Right, and there's plenty, and you would know. I mean, you would agree. There's plenty of things in physics where we observe the effects and then we hypothesize the cause before. We don't actually directly observe the cause initially, like the Higgs boson, for example. We hypothesized it based on the effects we saw of the mass of certain particles, but it was discovered based off of that prediction, or Neptune, another thing, right? So
yeah, but it wasn't just that we made it up. It was that there was like multiple lines of evidence converging.
I'm not trying to imply that we made it up, but I'm going off of your analogy where if you were to observe Jesus rise from the dead, then you could do all the measurements, all that stuff. You can infer that given the consequences, that maybe there's something that's supernatural because all the natural mechanisms and stuff were inadequate.
Well, you could infer that his heart started again.
Right.
And then there are ways
you could falsify other natural means by which it could have happened.
Yeah, to a degree, yeah.
Right. And then you could posit a theoretical entity to explain it.
But here's the thing, though. If there was a God who's doing this, and he only interacts causally, like one time in history.
I don't think.
Oh, hello?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it disconnected. Can you hear me?
You're audible. Oh,
sorry. I said if he only interacts this one time in history, like conveniently before the Enlightenment or before people understood science, then I guess all I would say is like it seems to me just out of the gate that he's not interested in being known to like people who actually understand the nature of scientific inquiry, because he's not giving us enough evidence to.
I think that Christians only believe that God interacted, that God only performed one miracle, and then he's never done anything post. I mean, I guess there are some cessations who do believe that. It's not the majority view.
Well, I mean, do you believe he does miracles today?
Yeah, literally. I don't know if we've interacted much before, Abe, but like this is something that I've literally been writing a book on the past 4 years on. entire reason.
Sorry, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I probably
No, I wasn't
but I
trying
didn't,
to put it in a condescending. I shouldn't have said that in a condescending way. I just sort of meant that. But yeah, but like I particularly healing miracles are the ones that I'm most interested in because I think those are the most empirically interesting. But like, are you even like when you bring these things up? Are you familiar with? Would you acknowledge that there are like claims that have happened that have data, but that maybe you just don't think that inferences are warranted, or you don't find them convincing, or is your claim that there are no claims at all made that would stand up to any kind of scrutiny? I guess I'm just sort of saying what is the proposal being assessed here?
I mean, I know there are claims that are always made, and there's even claims of like, you know, very rare like remissions of like cancer and stuff like that. But yeah, all those possibilities, since they are within the purview of like science and medicine, the fact that like some very rare cancer had a very rare remission, that doesn't lead you to the conclusion that God did it. It just leads you to the conclusion that it was very unlikely.
Well, right. It would depend on the circumstances by which it happened, right? If you could falsify the other metrics by which it did, like the known metrics by which cancer remits, you could say we can prove in this case none of those were applicable, right? And you could show that like it happened immediately after prayer. Well, now you have a causal entity which you could propose, or just say maybe the prayer is what did it in this case, right? And you could falsify the models to say we know that it wasn't this, or this.
Yeah, but I mean, there's still too much open-ended possibilities.
Well, we would want to hypothesize, like, okay, fine, what properties do we think this cause of whatever it did it has, right? And we could infer that. So, like, I would predict, for example, that if this, again, we'd have to get into specific cases, but if this was the only time this cancer ever remitted, right, and you couldn't, let's say that you could not replicate this in secular, there were no other examples of this cancer remitting in a secular context, right? The only examples that happened were when we were prayed over. Well, that's very unusual, not something that you would predict under the, you know, the unknown natural mechanism hypothesis, right?
Well,
whereas on the other, what was that?
Yeah, sure. The thing is this, though, that even if you're saying like prayer was this variable, number one, it's well known what like a placebo effect is. So prayer could be implicated.
Placebo effects are not going to cause remission of cancer. That there are limitations. They're not like don't work on organic diseases.
No, but I'm saying like a placebo effect could, like, you know, I don't know, relax someone to such a degree that like they're so like meditative, and then their immune system starts working better. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, these are possibilities, and
you could replicate that. Well, then what you would do is you'd have a study where you have people do meditation or prayer adjacent things, and you'd expect to see similar results in that case.
And maybe we would, but what I would say though is that from a theological point of view, you are saying that there's a God who wants to cure children of cancer, but only when they're prayed over. To me, that just seems absurd. Like, we have a bunch of atheist kids who have like cancers in the hospital, but he's not going to cure them because they didn't pray.
No, I don't think it's the kid's fault. I think it would be more so about, I think that you could say that people are cured of cancer all the time through natural means, right? Some people think
but you're saying if they don't pray over the kid, if the kid's an atheist and his parents are atheists, you're saying God is fine with watching him die.
No, but I'm saying that we're talking about inferring a miracle, right? And that can make it better, and it may be through a natural cause. But at that point, I wouldn't say God did it. I think you and I would agree that there you go, Jesus pooped. I think you would say that I lost my train of thought. That if an atheist kid got better of cancer suddenly, we would not infer that a God caused it because there was no prayer. My only point is to say that if God is trying to point out that he did this, you have to have some kind of religious context to make that inference. Whereas if atheist kids did get better from cancer by the grace of God, that'd be great morally for them. But we would never be able to say God was the reason behind it because there'd be no context. You would just
I hear. So let me reword it. You are saying that God is okay with foregoing the treatment of atheist children in the hospital because it doesn't speak to his glory when they're cured.
Because you wouldn't be able to infer that he was the one who caused it.
Yes. So because you wouldn't be able to infer that he's the one who caused it, God is okay with withholding the miracle from them.
Well, no, I think that, again, God could very well be healing children of cancer, and we don't know that he's doing it because you can't establish that God's the one causing it, right? There could be unexplained cancer remissions that God is in fact causing with atheist children, but because they don't happen in this religious context, we just mark them up as weirded remissions, right? I grant that's unfalsifiable, but that's sort of the whole point that we're going about.
It's unfalsifiable,
right?
Yeah.
That model is, I think the one I proposed earlier is falsifiable, but the idea of God healing people in ways that are not religiously significant, that's unfalsifiable. Like, he may be doing that, but we can't prove or disprove that he is or isn't, right?
If God cures people while not letting it be known it's unfalsifiable, why the heck didn't he do that as Jesus, right? He could have just came down to earth, let himself die. No one would have ever known about it, and he would have forgiven all our sins. Why didn't he do that?
Well, I think the whole point of the dying on the cross is that it's supposed to be an example for people, right? If no one really knows about it, it sort of defeats the whole purpose of the
No, you just said it doesn't. You just said it doesn't defeat the purpose because he can cure atheist kids and nobody knows about it. But it's still a miracle, and he did it because he wanted to save them.
You're talking about curing them of diseases. I thought you were talking about, like, salvation.
No, I'm bringing an analogy. I'm saying just like he can cure people of diseases because he cares about them miraculously, but nobody knows about it. Why couldn't he cure our sin miraculously and nobody knows about it?
Oh, well, because sin is not something that you just, it's not the same thing as a disease where sin, you have to willfully have that choice, right? In that sense, it's a heart change. It's not just a purely change of the genetics of a person who may have cancer.
Well, I think I made most of my points, Caleb. Thank you for
very well.
Well, it's late over here anyway, but
I appreciate that, Ray. Thank you.
I really appreciate the conversation, though, and I think you were very honest interlocutor, so I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Caleb, why are you so resistant? What happens if you lose your Christianity? Is it just like a nihilism that scares you?
Yeah, Ray, if I lose my Christianity, I lose all my friends and family, and then I just become depressed and realize there's no afterlife, and it's just so sad, and I couldn't bear to live in this world without that. So this Christianity is really just a crutch. That's, I think, what it comes down to.
Be real with me. How much of that is true? Like, certainly that's like 35% true.
I mean, yeah, look, I think that's probably a fair number, actually. I wouldn't dispute that.
There it is. There it is. And since you said that, now we know it's actually much greater than 35%.
35% I think is a fair number. I wouldn't go much higher than that. But no, do you agree though, Ray, that the reason why not the reason, but one reason why most people aren't atheists is because it's just so damn unappealing to people? Like, maybe you could be very much right, but it's not a fun. Like, the reality of atheism is to say that there is no afterlife, and there are people who are literally born with horrible conditions, who are victims through no fault of their own, who don't get a second chance, who die as infants, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's a world of chaos and chance, and it's scary. And like, maybe that is the world we live in, but like, it's so many people can't. I don't think that we literally have the mental capacity that we've evolved with it where we can handle that sort of notion of that nihilism.
I agree.
Yeah, that's what religion.
Well, here's the thing, Caleb. Here's the thing. If we're actually in that situation, you just said we haven't evolved the capacity. That's the point. Like, we would have to evolve the capacity slowly.
Right.
Which I think you said before, right? Like, people have been trying to improve slowly over generations. The fact that right now it seems daunting to live in a nihilistic universe doesn't mean it'll feel daunting in another 100, 200, 300 years for the people on planet Earth.
You could be right. But eventually, I think evolution is going to take a lot longer than 100, 200 years. But you could be right on that. But I'm saying with my genetics and my psychological development, my brain is, and not just my brain, but just the brain of Homo sapiens at this particular moment, right? Most of us have not evolved that capacity. Of course, our great.
Well,
I don't think you would feel.
You have, Caleb. You're just thinking about it.
How do you think you would feel, Caleb, if you lost your faith and you recognized that we're just evolved monkeys on a planet?
Well, I believe in evolution, so it's not the evolved part.
Sure, I just mean like we're from a natural process, and there's no guiding consciousness behind this, and we're just like little creatures that grew on a rock in the same way that like moss grows on a rock. How would you feel about that? Like, do you think you could function?
I think I probably could function, but I think it would be distressing just to, I think that humans are sort of unintentionally psychopathic in the sense that we are aware of so much suffering in the world, and yet we choose to ignore most of it because we wouldn't be able to cope if we spent every moment of every day agonizing about the Rwanda genocide or about kids in Mozambique getting malaria. Like, we just sort of become ambivalent, just say, I know it's there and it sucks, but oh well, I'm going to worry about my own life. And maybe that's the only way we can function, but it's really sad that we just become so psychopathic and so sociopathic.
Well, Caleb, here's the thing. That is kind of sad, but see, if someone's logical and scientific, they would say that just speaks to the truth, which is that we are evolved primates that lack empathy. Many people lack empathy. And that's just a fucking hard pill to swallow, but it doesn't mean it's false.
Right, I didn't say that it means it's false.
Yeah, but you said it's sad, so what is that implying?
That it implies that most people don't like it because it's unpalatable, and I think that's why religion is so widespread.
You're just defining it as unpalatable. If you look at every other animal on Earth to ever exist, any organism to ever